Last week, Sigma revealed their brand new 105mm f2.8 DG DN macro lens, which is a brand new addition to their lineup of lenses that have been specifically designed for full-frame mirrorless cameras. After spending about a week with the pre-production copy of this lens and playing around with it, I'm finally able to give you my final verdict. So, is this the versatile portrait and macro lens combo that we've all been waiting for? Let's find out. As always, I must start by stating that this is a totally independent test. Although Sigma have been really kind to lend me a pre-production copy of the lens, I do have to give it back, and I have not been paid in any way to make this review, so all the opinions in this video are purely my own. So let's start off by taking a look at the specs of this lens. At launch, this lens is going to be priced at £699 or $799. Now this makes it a shade cheaper than Sony's 90mm f2.8 macro, which is priced at £849 at the time of making this video, and it's the closest competitor when it comes to Sony glass. However, when priced next to the likes of the Tokina 100mm f2.8 macro, which you can pick up these days for around £415, you can see that Sigma are clearly pricing this lens towards the premium end of the market. The lens body is built from a combination of metal, hard plastics and rubber, and it feels super solid in the hand, kind of what you'd expect from a Sigma lens. On the lens body, there is a manual aperture dial which clicks at every third of a stop, or you can use the D-click button on the underside of the lens to allow for a smooth transition through the apertures. And this feature might be useful if you're planning on using this lens for video work and you want to adjust the exposure of your footage on the fly just using this manual aperture dial. I'm also pleased to see that they've included a lock switch that'll keep the aperture dial locked into auto mode so that it doesn't accidentally get knocked onto f22 by mistake. Sony, please take note of this. Working our way further around the lens, there's an MF to AF switch, as you'd kind of expect, and also an AF lock button that can be customized to function as a shortcut to a multitude of different features. Finally, there's a focus limiter switch, which will allow you to restrict the focusing range to prevent it racking all the way through the focal range should it miss focus. Weighing in at 715 grams, it's fairly lightweight and feels really well balanced on my full-frame Sony A7III. It's also worth mentioning that this lens is dust and splash proof, and evidence of this can be seen around the metal lens mount where there's a thin rubber gasket to help prevent crap getting inside your camera while shooting outdoors in the elements. Anyway, enough with the specs, let's see what this thing can really do in terms of image quality. So we're going to start things off with our patent pending wall test to see if there's any signs of distortion or vignetting. Shooting at a normal focusing distance with the lens stocked wide open at f2.8, there is a touch of vignetting at the corners, but nothing major. There's also a touch of barrel distortion going on at the edges if you look really closely here, but it's so faint that it's really nothing to worry about. In terms of sharpness, this thing is about as sharp as they come, even when shooting wide open. I had a lot of fun shooting some portraits with my friend Hannah when this lens first arrived, and I was really impressed with the results. In terms of bokeh, at f2.8 you're going to achieve a really nicely blurred background for your portraits when focusing at normal distances. It's not the smoothest bokeh I've seen, but obviously for a 2.8 lens it's not bad at all and it gives some nice results. You've obviously got to understand that you're not going to achieve that super thick blur that you would achieve with something like the Sigma 85mm f1.4 for example. In our bokeh balls test, the defocus balls of light adopted a noticeable cat's eye shape rather than being perfectly round. So that's something to bear in mind if that kind of thing bothers you. But on the positive side, when you zoom in, there aren't any noticeable traces of fringing in the high contrast areas, which is a really good sign. When shooting close up at 1:1 macro, the results are equally as impressive. Super sharp, full of detail, even when wide open at f2.8. So let's move on to AF performance now. When shooting with Hannah, I found that the focus locked on just about every single time. I didn't have any problems with hunting. Both face detection and IAF worked flawlessly on my camera with this lens, so no issues there either. When shooting in good lighting conditions, like outside on a bright day, the lens was quick to focus and had absolutely no trouble locking onto the target. However, when working in low light, I did find that it struggled a bit and would occasionally hunt before finally locking onto a target. In situations like this, the focus limiter switch definitely comes into its own and helps to rein it in a bit, and it stops it just from racking all the way through the focus range. Shooting up close gave a slightly similar problem where occasionally the lens would miss focus and hunt for the target, but it didn't happen so frequently that it became frustrating or a problem. However, when switching over to video mode, the AF worked flawlessly when focusing at a regular distance. It managed to track the subject without dropping focus at all, even when the subject was moving at a fairly fast pace. So that's good news for videographers. So with all of the testing done, where do I land on this lens? Well, let's start by looking at some of the pros. It's got great build quality, it's super sharp even when wide open. There aren't any major problems in terms of lens distortion or vignetting or fringing, which is really good. It's super versatile. I mean, having a portrait lens that's capable of focusing super close offers a lot of creative potential, so I'm a huge fan of that. Okay, so what are the downsides? Only thing I can really complain about is the AF being a bit sluggish in low light and also it being a bit flaky occasionally when focusing close up, but genuinely, that's about it. Now I'm thinking about it, I would genuinely be really interested to see how this lens stacks up against its competitors that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So the Sony 90mm f2.8 macro and also the Tokina 100mm f2.8 macro. But maybe that's something we can look at in an upcoming video. So if you want to see that, make sure you let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We've recently crossed the 1,000 subscribers threshold, which is f***ing incredible. We've only been doing this like 4 or 5 months, so that's amazing. Thank you so much for all the feedback and all your comments. It's all really helpful. Make sure you subscribe, thumbs up. See you in the next one.